The Lonely Lighthouse. Based on true events, the story is inspired by the real-life disappearance of 3 lighthouse keepers on the uninhabited Flannan Isles in Scotland in 1900. Robert had always dreamed of being a lighthouse keeper, and when he was assigned to the remote island off the coast of Maine, he was overjoyed. It was the perfect job for him, quiet, peaceful, and isolated. But something seemed off from the moment he arrived at the lighthouse. He couldn't shake the feeling of being watched as he went about his duties, and he started to feel like he was never really alone. One night, as Robert was tending the light, he heard a strange noise coming from the water below. He leaned out to try and get a better look and saw something that made his blood run cold. Strange, dark shapes were moving around the base of the lighthouse, circling it like sharks. Robert stood frozen in horror, unable to move as the shapes began to rise up out of the water, revealing themselves to be massive, shadowy creatures with glowing red eyes. He ran down the stairs to try and call for help, but the phone line was dead. His radio wasn't working either. He was completely cut off from the rest of the world. As the creatures began to assault the lighthouse, slamming against the walls with bone-rattling force, Robert found himself overcome with fear and paranoia. He couldn't understand what was happening or why he was being targeted. Days turned into weeks, and Robert was trapped in the lighthouse with no contact with the outside world. He began to see things. Ghostly apparitions, strange symbols etched into the walls, and other inexplicable phenomena. It was as if the lighthouse itself was alive and malevolent, and Robert was just a tiny cog in its machinations. One night, a violent storm rolled in, battering the lighthouse with gale-force winds and huge waves. Robert struggled to keep the light burning, but he knew that it was a losing battle. And then, suddenly, everything went quiet. The storm subsided, and the creatures disappeared. Robert was left alone, surrounded by the eerie silence of the empty lighthouse. Years later, a group of scientists exploring the waters off the coast of Maine discovered a massive underwater structure unlike anything they had ever seen before. It was an ancient temple devoted to a long-forgotten deity, and the creatures that Robert had seen were its guardians. The lighthouse had been built on top of the temple, disrupting the delicate balance that had kept the creatures at bay for centuries. Now that the lighthouse was abandoned, the temple had reasserted its dominance over the area, and the creatures had returned to their rightful place as guardians of the underworld. Robert's experience had been horrifying, but it was just a small part of a much larger, much darker story. And as he looked back on his time on the Lonely Lighthouse, he knew that he had been lucky to survive. Are you brave enough to face the chills and thrills of our horror story? Watch and share if you dare, and don't forget to subscribe to stay tuned for our spine-tingling narratives. Subscribe to our channel to never miss our latest updates.